everybody. This is Jazmin Mangra, and we're in our next installment of From Silos to Sirens, where I'm highlighting various women, femme, and non-binary student leaders on campus, as well as in the community. I do want to ground us in that we are in the Hawaiian Kingdom. We're on the island of Oahu, which is part of the ancestral lands of Kanaka, Maui. I am very grateful and very privileged to be a settler scholar here at Mānoa, in this land that has fed me and nurtured me during my time here. Today we have a guest who has been a kumu of mine, a mentor, a friend, and supporter. So I'm just very grateful to have this person here. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for us.
Aloha mai kako o Māhea Ahia ko'ui noa Wahanauia ma Kaliponi no Maui mai au e noho ana wau I Kaneohe I keia manawa. Aloha, I'm Māhea Ahia. Friends call me Māhea. I was born on the ancestral lands of the Tongva in Los Angeles, and I grew up as a diasporic Kanaka ʻŌiwi on the lands of the Ahashiman in Dana Point, California. I moved to Maui, where my dad's ancestral lands are, with my family in Maui in 2008. And I have been in the islands ever since. I'm now on Oahu at University of Hawai'i at Mānoa. And so I reside in Kaneohe with an auntie out here. I can see the beautiful Ko'olau Mountains, which are kind of misty today. We're in the country, so you may hear some chickens and other birds and animals, which I love to be able to be connected to nature in this way. What else would you like to know?
I think academic journey is sometimes helpful for folks that are wanting to they're still figuring out their own pathways. So if you want to share like some of your academic journey and how you ended up deciding which PhD program you were going to go into.
A very important question. So I consider myself a lifelong learner. I have been in school since preschool and have mostly continuously taken classes here or there or workshops or some form of learning my entire life. I did my bachelor's in at UC Berkeley. I'm a California girl to start with. And at Berkeley, I like to let people know that I was actually a double major for a long time. I was majoring in theater arts, particularly dance and drama, and trying to double major as an English major because I also wanted to be a writer. I ended up getting enough work as an artist that there wasn't enough time to do both. So I dropped the English major. Which is funny because I've kind of come full circle and now I'm finishing my PhD in the English department at UH Manoa. So that's all to say that there are different journeys, and just because you start one doesn't mean you can't circle around to it again later. I did my master's in mythology and psychology at a psychology institute called Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara. I loved living in Santa Barbara. That's another really great college town. In between that, I worked a lot as a freelance writer and an artist, documentary filmmaker. So I did a certificate program at UC Irvine in screenwriting. They had a lot of the professors from UCLA's screenwriting program who lived in Orange County that taught the program. So I sharpened my writing skills in creative writing and screenwriting at UCI. I made my way to Maui because in the middle of my journey at Pacifica, I was actually moving on into the PhD program at that time and starting to take classes towards that. And I had a recurring dream, kind of a series of dreams in which I could oli and olelo, I could chant and speak in Hawaiian. And at that point, I didn't know how to do that, being a diasporic Kanaka. So I took that as a ho'elona, as a sign that I needed to move home and learn. So I moved to Maui and was lucky to complete the Hawaiian Studies certificate program at Maui College, and I had fantastic mentors there. Kalekua Kaeo, Kahele Dukalo, all of my Olelo Kumu, Kapa, and so many amazing Kumu. Akela Kauniopio Crozer was my first Olelo Kumu. And so I'm so grateful to them. I also, timing and grace allowed me to learn Oli and hula from Kumu Keli'i Rachel. So I got to be a part of Halau Keala Okamaile for a few years. At the same time, I also was invited into ceremony at Pu'ukohola, which is one of the annual ceremonies on Hawaii Island at Kamehameha's Heiau. So I was able to learn some ancestral chants to chant there, which was a really profound experience. I was able to chant Hawi Kalani, which is a 1,000 long line chant, prophecy chant, and that really connected me to the work that I'm doing today. So that journey, bringing me to Oahu to go to school at Mānoa and continue in a PhD program. I am a bereaved mother, so I had a baby girl, Hina Aina Meleona Lani, who was born with congenital issues, and I learned all about disability rights, taking care of her. She didn't live past her 3rd birthday, but everything I do now is in honor of her, in honor of my Hina girl. She has definitely guided my path in my creative writing. So when it was time to choose a PhD program, I knew I wanted to do something creative and meaningful and story-wise. So my master's was in mythology, and I was looking at the power of stories to heal. So I knew that my own self-healing and healing my community, doing a lot of grief work, doing a lot of embodied work, finding ways to creatively express and connect me to my ancestral stories brought me to the English department. So there is no Hawaiian Studies PhD at the time. And so most of us pick other programs. So we go into Indigenous politics or American Studies or English. English happens to have an entire Pacific writers track. So that was a perfect fit for me. Having been an English major before, it was a really good fit. And it allowed me to be a graduate assistant with them and to teach. So I knew I would get teaching experience. So I was able to teach creative writing and decolonial literature, classes like that, in order to sharpen my writing skills, to really learn to be a good critical thinker, and to really sharpen my analysis. The English department is excellent for, close reading skills and really working on our analysis. So that brought me into the PhD, and along the way led me into a graduate certificate in women, gender, and sexuality studies. So I'm just completing my capstone this semester for that. So my academic journey has been very rounded. A lot of what some people might call detours, but those learning opportunities actually make us like the whole person that we are. My name, Māhea means full moon. And so I kind of liken it to all the different phases of the moon and the different transitions that I've gone to. And I know things will circle around and around again. Just like my academic journey, I hope to become a professor. So hopefully all of these skills have led to there. I am about to embark on a new academic adventure. I was just selected for the Henry Rowe-Cloud Dissertation Writing Fellowship. It's an Indigenous fellowship for finishing our doctorate studies at Yale. So I will be under the tutelage of Hi'ile Hobart, and I'm super excited for that. So I can bring back all of that kind of East Coast experience into my academic work when I return to Hawaii, which is where I intend to stay.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I love that. And thank you for sharing those pieces, Māhea, for being very vulnerable with us here. Yeah, it has always struck me that like you are very well-rounded with your education, and I feel it's very intentional because you don't want to like leave these stones unturned, which I've always really appreciated. You kind of touched on it already, but I'm curious, you have all this like theater and arts background as well as writing, creative writing, and then this WGSS component comes in. because I actually met you through WGSS, Indigenous Feminisms, 2 falls ago. And I'm curious how you ended up teaching for WGSS, and sort of like what kind of moments came out of that worked with your academic work.
So WGSS has been a dream job for me. I've truly enjoyed it. One of the things I love best about women, gender, and sexuality studies is, number one, it's pushing at the forefront, the cutting edge scholarship in queer theory, and especially Pacific Indigenous queer theory. And so creating an entire new program within WGSS gave so much space and breadth for me to bring in some of my own personal work that I do on Indigenous feminisms and Indigenous gender and sexuality. I was lucky to get, so English has 4 years of funding, and then after that, our GA ships ended, and I'm taking a long road through a leisurely tour through my PhD. So I needed to get funding for a few more years to complete mine, and I was really lucky to get a GA ship with WGSS. And so that has allowed me to teach classes. The first class I taught was an island feminisms class, and then an Indigenous women's health, then the Indigenous feminism, women in revolution, which is really a lot of fun. I've taught intro to LGBTQ, women's history, women in the media. So a whole range of classes that I might not have been able to teach in any other department. Since WGSS is a relatively small department, it has given me an opportunity to teach like this huge range of classes, where in other departments I might just be teaching like first level composition, which is wonderful. In English, I created my own place-based pedagogy based on PICO, which are the connection points on our body to the land and to relationships. And so I'm very excited about grounding all of my work in place and in the epistemologies, or you know, the Hawaiian ways of knowing and being, and bringing that to students. As a diasporic person, I sometimes feel like I missed out on a lot of things, so I do my best to provide it to the students I have. It's also a way of me getting to sort of dwell in those spaces of thinking, those realms of reading the world as a poem, reading for kauna, reading for all of these ancestral ways of relating to people, to plants, to the Aina, and bringing all of that into Indigenous frameworks where those are acceptable ways of teaching. I love feminism because it is very story oriented. It's very much based in the personal as political. And so by teaching from a personal perspective that values autoethnography and values our own voices as creating theory. One of my favorite women scholars from Aotearoa teaches decolonization, and she teaches us that we need to theorize for ourselves, you know, rather than taking in the traditional white male academic variation of how we should look at the world. Linda Tuhiwai-Smith teaches us that we can take our own knowledge and explain it to others and articulate that point of view, and that becomes valid when we can name these experiences and share them with others. So that has been really profound for me, to be able to develop my own theorizing of mo'o ways of being. So mo'o are Hawaiian reptilian water deities, and that's what my dissertation work is on. I bring in a lot of disabilities, justice lenses in the way that we talk about stories, and we often talk about trauma and intergenerational trauma and the severing of relations and dispossession of lands and bodies, which are intimately connected. The violence that happens to our lands also happens to our bodies when we think of issues like missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. And so bringing all of these different pieces together, it has allowed me to look at the literature that deals with these, to look at the stories, and to create new stories that speak to our conditions today. Is really important for me to take our ancestral stories of what I have found as a Hawaiian form of patriarchy, Hawaiian instances of interpersonal violence, and bringing them into a contemporary context, and really being able to have those hard, difficult conversations with my community and with students, so that we can really build an emergent theory, build a new world. And that's kind of what I'm here for.
I love it. I think that sometimes people are surprised, like how Pacifica women are really showing up, like in some of these departments, WGSS, and then English department. People are like, "What?" But like they're really running it. Like it's really amazing to see. Like we have you, we have Leana Noholova'a, No Uravilla, Brandy McDougall, like all these amazing people. Kumu Heoli, you know, obviously does a lot of work with you guys too. So I wish that I had had more time to lean into that department. If I did, I would have. But again, beautiful stuff. If you guys are students, current students or future students, definitely look into these beautiful like scholars, artists that we have on campus to like sort of like just like raise your level of like understanding and feeling and how you're processing academia, because it's very different than the cookie cutter way, I would say. Um, so I do want to swing to you spoke about being diasporic Kanaka. I think sometimes people don't always know what it means to be diasporic, and sort of when you are indigenous to another place, how that's like sort of like an extra level of like um, it's a different kind of feeling than just being just diasporic to other ways. So do you mind touching on that and like kind of explaining like what that experience has been like for you being diasporic Kanaka ʻŌiwi?
So I was fortunate in some ways. My dad is a musician, a Hawaiian musician. He loved jazz. So I grew up with jazz music in the house. And because he was a musician and intimately connected with the Los Angeles Hawaiian community, I did grow up with connections. So I'm so grateful for that, and for all the aunties who helped me along the way. Um, at the same time, I was about an hour and a half south, so I was never like in the middle of it. I didn't get to grow up with my people. So I grew up with a sense of isolation, a sense of not really belonging anywhere in particular. Like my dad would always say, "Oh, you know, someday we're going to move home. We're going to go home." And my sister and I automatically said that, "Yeah, we're going to move home." And then like one day I realized, I'm like, but I've never lived there. So how do I call that? How do I say I'm moving home when this is really all I've known? I've, you know, grown up in California and lived up and down the coast, um, lived back east for a little bit, but I never lived in Hawaii. How do I call that home? I also had a lot of experiences growing up where people would say, like, you don't look Hawaiian. And I'm a very fair passing, well-spoken, because I'm overeducated and underemployed. And no matter how much I olelo and how much I understand, I still have a California twang when I speak. It's very difficult for me to get rid of that. I just have to own it, that is part of my experience. And so what I've tried to do is sort of turn it around, huli it for myself, and acknowledge that this is what it means to be under colonialism. When our families get exiled and they have to move elsewhere in order to make a living, they have to go elsewhere because their, you know, family relations at home weren't strong enough to hold them. They had to go somewhere else and make their own way. And my generation is the product of that. You know, everybody thought, oh, well, the kids will go away and then they'll learn all the skills of the American system and then they'll come back. But so many of my friends that I grew up with in California, they're not gonna move back. So what do we do to keep all of our people connected in other ways? So I was really fortunate. I fell in with a lot of different groups in Los Angeles. I did dance hula for a little bit. I would always go to all of the festivals. I was lucky to be mentored by some Hawaiian aunties, and I did a lot of documentary film work for them. So I would go to their festivals and make short videos, which would help them to get more funding for these festivals. So that was my way of giving back with my skill set and being able to build those pilina better. I was able to win scholarships to go off to college because of those relations. And they really showed me what it's like to sort of hold it down in another place. Along the way, I also became more conscious of what it's like to be an Indigenous person on someone else's Indigenous land. So the Ahashimin in San Juan Capistrano are trying to reclaim a lot of their land. And so they've started to get some spaces and are growing those. So I do my best to support that and to encourage my family to support that kind of work. It's very important that wherever we are, we find out what the Indigenous people of that, the natives of that particular place are and what they want, not what we think they want, but really asking them, how can we best support you? Sometimes that means staying away from their ceremonies. Like you may think, oh, I'm going to go show up and support their ceremony. But sometimes what they want is actually their own people around them without intrusion. Sometimes they want to invite us in and share. So really building relations strong enough that we can be honest with each other and really support the agency and what we call Ahia. Ahia is our word for sovereignty and breath and rising. We use a term education that's been coined by contemporary Hawaiians to mean like the education of social consciousness, the education of liberation, the education of our own rising as a lahui in community and in collaboration with all those around us. So being diasporic for me means taking the best of what and the skills that I've learned on the continent, coming home and then really learning to listen. So a big part of my journey, it was not easy coming home. Both my sister and I came home about the same time. She was in New York as a dancer, working professionally in theater and finishing up a degree in medicine in acupuncture and herbology. So when she was hanai'd by a Native American in New York, we find these other connections with Indigenous people who sort of mentor us and bring us home to our own. She was in the sweat lodge and Noi received a clear message from our kupuna that said, you need to go home and take care of your own people. And so she and I ended up moving to Maui within about 6 months of each other and, regrounding ourselves in our language and culture and practices. And that's a lot of it. Family, relations, rebuilding the relations that have been broken over time because of colonialism. That's all hard work. It's really hard work. So because there isn't enough space and resources when they'd say to the diasporic folks, you need to come home, you need to come home. But when we get here, there's not really a clear path for us to reintegrate. So for Noi and I, it's been trying to find our own path and then like reaching our hand back to the next folks and trying to help them integrate too. Because relations and trust take a long time to build. It's not just like you can just show up somewhere and say, hey, I'm Kanaka. So yes, I belong here, but there's a different level of kuleana. I think of my work with Maui. I'm a hea protector for Haleakala. And that's my mountain. But when I go to Mauna Kea, although I'm genealogically connected to Mauna Kea, there are folks there who grew up on that mountain, who know it, like the back of their hand. They are so intimately connected. It's their job to decide and their agency to choose what they need for their own mountain and space. And the rest of us who are also have some kuleana, but not as much, to sort of take a step back and find out how we can support. And so those are lessons I learned because of being diasporic, is learning how to slow down and listen, like deeply, deeply listen, and not allow what I think I know to get in the way, but to really have a sense of feminist curiosity and really like lean into the uncomfortability of being unsettled and not knowing and being okay with that. I think being uncertain is really scary to Americans. They they're taught to like have control of things. We're in control. Part of really learning to be in relation is to give up that control and to say, okay, I'm here for whatever happens. I bring my best. I always do my best. And then I'm going to have to live with that however I can best serve.
Wow. Yeah. I love that you shared that piece of like the belonging and where do I belong, and in certain there are certain ways like Auntie Peggy, I'm sure that you've run into her at some points, says like, no matter where I go, I'm gonna be a settler, you know, and I have to learn to like, what is my kuleana now in the various spaces that I'm taking? Because even if I go back to like, you know, where my grandparents were born, I don't speak the language. I didn't necessarily eat the food, you know. So what does that mean for me, and what is my role and stuff in this place? And I definitely resonated with that personally, being Indo-Guyanese and Panamanian and Filipina, but then I was born and raised in Minnesota. And so we definitely have bits and pieces of those communities there, but not a lot. So, you know, growing up, I wasn't like talking about the food that I was eating with anybody around me. And that definitely shapes the way that you socialize with people and informs your identity. But it's always a journey, like you said, lifelong learning. Um, since we were talking about your time on the continent, I'm curious what kinds of, because I know you've always been busy, you've always been doing things. So I'm curious what kind of projects were you involved in on the continent, and how did those kind of prepare you for some of the social movements that you ended up taking up when you came to back to the islands?
Hmm. So I'm my activist genealogy, I guess, basically starts when I was an undergrad at Berkeley. So I was part of different sit-ins on campus and shutting down the Bay Bridge for issues, and really becoming politically conscious at that time. And I'm grateful to that. So after that, when I moved back to Los Angeles to be an actor and a writer, I was lucky to make friends in the what they call performance art. So performance art is often very politically charged. It's theater based in, theater of the oppressed and other forms that seek to build political consciousness through interactive media, through theater, through arts, music, painting, any kind of creativity that challenges different expectations and boundaries. So one of my joys was actually working with Leilani Chan, who is from Hawaii, and she happened to be living in Los Angeles there and invited me into her group Theater Productions. And we did several different productions together. We got some grant money to do what we called Kalo projects. And we went around to the Hawaiian community and held theater workshops and did some interviews with different kumuhula and different community participants. We taught theater to other folks in the area, and we created theater to really give voice to the diasporic experience in Los Angeles, to what it's like to be from Hawaii and to miss it, or what it's like to be born in Los Angeles and then, trying to build connections and community wherever we are. So we did that a couple different years in a row. And then I was lucky enough to do music and help assist in directing and producing her solo show. And so coming full circle, Leilani and I are working again with Kumu Haili Baker this summer. There is the Asian American Theater Festival and consortium Confest. So it's a theater festival. It's both a playwright festival, theater festival, as well as a conference where there's classes and workshops. And so I am lucky enough to be co-writing a 10-minute play with my sister Noi called Fighting Like Mad. It has to do with the Maui fires and mental health. And so coming full circle, working with Leilani again, like I said, things come around and around in your life. You never know when and how, but it's always has to do with those deep relations that you formed over time. So political theater is one of the things I did, documentary film I did. I tried to help with the Hawaiian community in both San Francisco and Los Angeles, where I lived and worked in both of those places. And all of those kinds of projects really taught me to to learn to trust my na'au. So that's what I got out of it the most. So na'au knowledge, that's that embodied part in our piko, in our belly button, our connections to our mother, our ancestral connections to the Aina, learning to trust that intuitive knowledge of where I should go next has been probably a lifelong lesson. But one that I learned particularly during that time, because I started having invitations to all kinds of different projects and knowing which were the best ones for me and which were going to serve my lahui the most in the long run, which were going to, work towards my own liberation. Those were always the ones that I chose and would look for signs of confirmation that I was on the right path. So some of the ways that I do are na'au knowledge, like I do na'au checks, I check in with my gut. There's also something that we call like ike papa lua, which is like the second sight. It's the insight, the foresight, like trying to figure out your long-term visions and fit what you do in with reaching those, like being the type of kupuna you want to be, but trying to be that way now, like trying to live as if you are that role now as much as possible, and to really live into that. Those are some of the lessons that I learned while on the continent through the projects that I did. And so they've all kind of come to fruition in my current research and work. They all seem to be just sort of like steps, little steps that lead up to each other. And those webs, those spider webs that we build with each other of relationality, sometimes they like ting here or ting there, they kind of pull on you. And then you're like, oh, I think I'm going to go this way now, or, oh, I'm going to go that way now. And really learning to trust that.
Yeah, I definitely, I kind of resonate with that because before I decided to come here for school, I just had like, it just was like a feeling. I wasn't like, YOLO, I'm just gonna go to Hawaii. It wasn't like that. I was like, I think that I can benefit from this. I really want to be uncomfortable and be in a place that I have never been before. That's the culture is very different. The climate is very different. Both literally and in the abstract sense. And you can only grow from that. Like all those challenges and things
And
really
it's
helps you to,
such a pleasure to get to know you. We love Kanaka love when people like you come here and exchange and share and grow together. That's like the ideal ally situation, if ever there was one.
I definitely like to just enter a space and to just want to just consume the things around you without actually like producing and providing anything of your own in return. Yeah, has never worked. It never felt right to me. But I appreciate that. I'm very thankful for that. I want to kind of talk about, I have so many questions and so little time. I'm wondering if you could tell us more about your time on the Mauna Kea, and your concept of brave spaces. Because when you first brought those up in class, it was my first time hearing it, but it just made so much sense to me of like that in every moment we're constantly taking things in. We can't not do that. So like, how do we honor that and hold space for that? Yeah.
Love the idea of brave space. I did not make it up. It's a term that comes from like the 70s or 80s. And forgive me, I can't off the top of my head figure out who coined it because so many people have used it.
Right.
But I like it because I actually don't believe there are any completely safe spaces anywhere. Even in academia, the academic system was made by white Christian men of class and property. That is, none of those identities fit me. And so I know that the institution from its genealogical foundations were aimed at a certain type of person that is not me. And so until we can radically transform it, it still has that legacy of harm. And so any spaces that I go into, I do my best to create with community, because we can't do anything alone. We're always in community with things, even if it's just with the aina, like that's a community right there. Right now in my room, when I'm studying, I look out and I can see the Ko'olau Mountains. I can see my tea leaf plants. I can see the different trees around here that feed and flower. And that's a relationship. The birds in the trees are a relationship. The chickens, the cats, everything here are a relationship to me. And so learning to build relation wherever I am is super important. Knowing my kuleana to the space that I'm in is really important. So my time at Mauna Kea, it really started because of my protection of Haleakala on Maui. And when we were arrested for protecting our mountain, many of the leaders of the Mauna Kea movement came and stood with us. You know, Havane, all the folks came and stood with us. And it was such an honor to stand alongside Mehana and, you know, all the folks that came over. We knew that when their mountain put out a kahea, when they called, that we would go return that, you know, that aloha. And so I always knew when they put out the kahea that I would go. I was fortunate. We formed what we called affinity groups. They're like small pods that we can travel together to make sure that we take care of our own resources. We didn't want to go to Mauna Kea and be a burden. We wanted to go and bring. We wanted to bring food. We wanted to bring our mana. We wanted to bring our experience and kind of our fearlessness to be able to stand up for what we believe in. Because I do believe that with experience, we come to see what is pono, what is right, and we know in our na'au when it's important to stand up for something. So I was among the group that went immediately. I was there from the second day. Like I went to the meeting Friday night and then I showed up Saturday morning with my tent and all of my food to share. I was lucky I got to see the setting up of the pu'uhonua. So pu'uhonua is a sanctuary. It's a safe enough space. It's also a brave space where we are protected enough by each other's care that we're allowed to be vulnerable, that we can bring our whole selves, that we can show up as we are to the best of our ability to do our best each and every moment. But there is grace for being human. And there are ways to relate to each other where we can repair harm. And it's a space where we come with curiosity and with generosity of spirit. And so I was able to see this space being set up as a pu'uhonua. As crowds filtered in, you know, we went from 50 to 100 to 1,000. We created Pu'uhuluhulu University. The uni became a space like a pu'uhonua within a pu'uhonua, a place of refuge within that, because we were all scholars and activists and artists. We held like 20 classes a day. So this was an alternative form of education where we had all of the kumuhula, kumukula, like the professors, the visiting scholars, makers, artists, crafters, you name it, we had classes in it. And so we were able to offer a type of education to all our people. So in Hawaii, like most people don't even get a real Hawaiian history in the K through 12, like a solid one, let alone learning about other cultures other than, you know, Western history, other than American history. And so this was a time for our Palestinian friends, our African friends, like all these other people coming to the mountain as allies, are, you know, contingencies from Tonga and Samoa and Japan coming to really offer their respects to our mauna, to our elders, and to the land itself. They graciously held classes for us so we could learn and share with each other, a completely different type of educational experience altogether. It's revolutionary, and I hope that we continue to produce that kind of all access, free to everyone, community learning all together. So there wasn't like just kids classes or just adults, but we all learned Olelo Hawaii together in the same space. Beautiful, beautiful experiment. Prefiguring futures on the Mauna, we had free healthcare by the Mauna medics. We had free childcare, free food, free tents if you didn't have one. It was initially called the Kanaka Costco because we had literally had every kind of thing you might possibly need. Maria Lohalani Brown, one of my affinity members, was kind enough to rename it Maka'olala Hawai'i, the ho'olaka, which is like to furnish, to be well supplied. So we had our tents that had all of the supplies. Really anything you could think of, we were able to provide our own people, all based on donations. So that's an incredible, radical way of living, you know, just based on generosity and donations and giving and creating our own security protocols and our own ways of taking care of each other. That experience, unfortunately, there were also a lot of my work is in gendered and sexual violence. So I did get reports of that kind of thing happening on the Mauna because so many crowds came up, right? We had thousands of people and they bring up their trauma with them. And so we created protocols to handle that. And that kind of work has continued on in the community. I've been privileged to build other pu'uhonua on Maui. My sister is one of the co-founders of the Mauna Medics, along with Kalamani Heo, Dr. Kalama. When the Maui fires hit, my sister sort of called in that infrastructure that had been built, and all of those nurses and practitioners, they all flew over to Maui and took care of the Maui folks. So I was there on and off to help in Maui as well with the renamed Maui Medics, healers. And so they're continuing that really amazing work. One of the other things that happened is I mentioned the Palestinian scholars who came. They came up to the Mauna. They did ceremony with us 3 times a day. They taught classes for us. And because we built such strong relations from the mountain experience and from other experiences we had had in conversations, when the Maui fires happened in my hometown where I had lived and worked for years, those same beloved souls came together, even though they were having their own things in their own communities, and they created a webinar and they raised money for the Maui fire victims. And so we see this like care circle being built to now that there's the atrocities happening in Gaza and the genocide happening there. Those relations are very dear to me. And so I do my best to check in with them now. And so it's this reciprocal kind of care that's built based on vulnerability and shared political liberatory goals based on our relations as wahine, as activists, as mothers, daughters, sisters, folks who care about each other across boundaries. We use the word internationalism. And that's, you know, that's a political science term, but that really speaks to those kind of transnational feminist bonds that we build with each other that hold each other in times of crisis. And from the crisis on the Mauna of protection to the crisis on Maui with the dispossession of life and homes due to the wildfires, to the genocide in Gaza, all of these they build on each other, and we gain skills and we gain experience on how to better care for each other. Sarah Imud came to our campus and did workshops on love letters. And so we've taken to writing, even writing yourself a love letter can be really healing. Like these things going on in the world, climate change, all these things happening in our lives, you know, how do we care for each other during these periods of injustice, of strife, of just, you know, even just surviving as a college student is a lot. You know, we got through COVID, we got through the pandemic. I mean, COVID's still going, so we're not out of the water, but we have learned techniques on how to navigate. You know, now we know that we can do everything via Zoom if we have to. So this is wonderful. You know, the technology allows us to connect in ways we didn't know we could connect before. And I think connection, relationality, what Hawaiians call pilina. So pili is like that stickiness that binds things together. Our pilina to each other are what help us get through everything.
I remember when I first learned about pu'uhonua, like what it stands for, and Mauna Kea, obviously, but also what what came to mind for me immediately was the George Floyd autonomous zone that we had in Minneapolis in 2020, in the summer of 2020. Yeah, that was definitely a time where we saw a state that existed outside of the state, the settler state. And I saw similar things, like people were taking care of each other, we fed each other, we clothed each other. We didn't have access to grocery stores. And it
We
was like
didn't
all
have
hands.
water up on the top of a mountain, no
Yeah,
fresh water.
yeah. Like it's amazing when people are called to help, people show up for each other in amazing ways. And that's not something that a police department is going to do for you. That's not something that the mayor or the, they're not going to do that. They're not doing that for you right now. So when you really need help, we've seen like how Lahaina had its back turned on, had people turn their backs on them. And it's really unfortunate. I think I'm wishing now back in that time in 2020 that I had known more about what was going on the Mauna. Which is why I'm really invested in this work on silos and how do we break apart these silos and how do we exchange information and be better global citizens, global neighbors to each other. Because whatever is going on over there, it will affect us. And even if it doesn't, like we should know about what's going on to our people. We're all earthlings here. So and that sharing of information is what helps us help each other and help ourselves. Um,
A lot of folks don't
yeah.
know that we have Pa'a up on the Mauna still. So there's a small group of folks, I give the shout out to them who are still holding it down because we may have to go back up again. It's
Exactly.
things cycle around and around and around, and time is not always kind.
Yeah. Yeah. And then during that time, I also learned that like the Minneapolis Police Department was receiving training from IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. So it all comes around. And if they have networks, then we also should have our own networks. So that's what I say. But yeah, speaking of that, I'm wondering if you can tell us about SFJP, Students and Faculty for Justice in Palestine, and like, obviously you guys have you brought in Sarah, you brought in Malak Matar, and the work that's being done right now is crucial. So how did you get involved with that? And what would you say to people that are curious but don't know where to begin? Maybe they don't have some of those historical context to build with.
That's an excellent question. So I was lucky when I was looking around at PhD programs. I took Cindy Franklin's life writing class, uncivil rights and lives, and that was actually really my introduction to Palestinian struggles and studies. I'm ashamed that I was so ignorant that I really didn't know all that much, but I learned quite a lot from her. And once you start reading the stories, we read this stories of children of freedom, stories of children who are in prisons. And once I read those stories, I wrote a letter, and basically it said like I will no longer look away. Like once you hear this, you can't not do anything.
Mhm.
There is a human empathetic response that says I can't, as a person of conscience, just ignore this any longer. So I started to want to learn more, and we have Students and Faculty for Justice in Palestine at UH. It's a group. We've been in RIO sometimes we don't fill out the paperwork, but we're still going strong. And our numbers have grown, thank goodness, because people want to learn more. So a lot of the work we do are teach-ins, movie nights, things to introduce people to the historical struggles of Palestine and the insertion of the state of Israel, which is a political entity. So one of the things that we try and remind people is being pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist is not at all, it's actually something to really follow, there's all this rhetoric about like Antifa and you are being racist and, all of that kind of rhetoric. But it's not. It's looking at liberation struggles. It's easy for me to associate because I relate as an Indigenous person to the Indigenous people of Palestine. So that's a very natural link. And the more I learn about their history and their settler colonial history is very much like ours because we have a lot of the same colonists, right? America, Britain, all the things. One of the most beautiful things about SFJP that is completely the result of Cindy's beautiful work, laying the foundations as an anti-Zionist Jew herself. She helped to create what we call decolonial November. So every November we bring in a scholar, artist, activist to come speak to us. And so we spend like a whole week with them. And it's these, it's really the informal times, not the big lectures that actually bring us together. We go to the beach, we eat together, we have pizza nights, sometimes they cook food from their particular region of the world. I've had some amazing dinners. And it's these informal relations that we build that keep us bonded to each other and keep us on signal threads to keep each other abreast of what's happened. During this tragedy, it's been really, really a lifeline to find out and hold space for those who have lost family members. Like entire genealogies have been wiped out.
Yeah.
And so we knew that when we were on the mountain and we had folks from other places that cared about us, it kept us going strong. And so all we can do is hope that, us sending our pule and our mana to them is at least a respite, a space where they can come and grieve. We can hold that grief for them. The SFJP's work continues. We're now working with other organizations across the island of Oahu, which is great. So we're growing our numbers. We will continue to do things until Palestine is free, until Hawaii is free, and they need to deoccupy, they need to decolonize, and until all of our liberations, every liberation struggle is intertwined with each other. Yeah. We cannot have any freedom until all of us are free. And so we take that very seriously. And so we will continue to support in whatever ways that we can and encourage people. So those who don't know, when you see a flyer around, we're actually really, really kind-hearted people who care about each other. It's not easy work to do. So whenever you find folks who are willing to do that work with you, it's always a joy. It's like, oh, my people. Yeah. So we welcome you all. We welcome anyone who wants to just learn. Come to our movie nights. Those are really great because then we're just going to have informal discussions after the movie. It's a really, we're not going to recruit you, we're not going to like force you to do any more than that. We just want everyone to learn enough so that they can make conscious decisions about what they're learning, because the media rhetoric is feeding really stories that are lies. That's really all they are. I call myself a critical mythologist because I look at these mythologies that are being put out through media and like, that's wrong, that's not factual. And so really talking to folks from those communities, and again, always deferring to them, that they have the most kuleana, those from that community, finding out what they need for support. Sometimes it's space, sometimes it's a meal, sometimes it's a GoFundMe for their other students who are at schools that are, under lockdown right now. There's all kinds of things we could be doing to help each other. And if you want to know more, I would recommend looking on the website of the Feminist Collective, the Feminist Collective Sarah Imud is part of, and so they have lots and lots of resources and information that you can educate yourself with. Because that's one of the other things we need to learn to do is not make the most marginalized do all the labor for us. So like the more that we can take on, the less burdening we're doing to them. They already have a lot on their plate. So the more we can pick up the slack and teach each other. Like it's, as a fair passing Hawaiian, it's my, my kuleana as someone who lived on the continent to be able to talk to those people and try and educate them, because they may listen to me more than they may listen to someone else. So we each work in whatever realm we can.
Yeah. Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, if anyone's curious or if anyone's feeling like, oh, this is too heavy, definitely go into your own reading, do your own work, and do your own like, don't just take the first thing that you hear. Definitely like listen to everybody. I do also want to spotlight JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace. Hawaii has also been doing a lot of great work along with SFJP. They're happy to answer any questions as well. These are all like super helpful, very kind people. They're not going to jump on you. They're not going to be scared. Like, just if you wanted to like dip your toe in, and they're hosting a lot of events, anybody can go. So I strongly recommend that.
I had the
Um,
pleasure of working with them on the Aha
mhm.
Virum. So they really are a lovely group of people. Yeah, please.
Yeah. I do want to pivot. I know that like as of recently, a lot of your work has been built around this transformative justice stuff and somatic memory? Question mark, yes. Can you explain what these terms are and what sort of led you to these sort of practices?
Indigenous feminism is one of the languages that I use to sort of describe it. So we learn in Indigenous feminism how much bodies and land are intertwined and how we need to decolonize both. A lot of that work teaches us about intergenerational trauma. Trauma gets stored in the body. We know this from psychology, from epigenetics. We know that all of the memories of my grandmother's grandmothers have been passed down through all of the cells that make up my own body. And so I carry my grandparents' trauma in my own body, which is just one more layer that may activate my own trauma. It may never be activated for you, but for many of us, it gets activated by our own experiences in this life. And so we have multiple layers of trauma that we're trying to move through. And when the body stores it, then it makes it that much harder to sort of unpeel that layer, all those different layers. So transformative justice is some of the work that we can do. My training came a lot during COVID, actually. So while most people were just trying to get through COVID, I took the opportunity to take a lot of online trainings because some of the great teachers of somatic healing, folks like Stacey Haynes, some of the somatic abolition folks like my grandmother's hands had workshops. So I did an entire embodied social justice certificate program during those 3 years. And I was able to study with Resma Menikin and Rev Angel and Angel Acosta, a whole bunch of these like really big names, which would cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to fly and train with. But I was able to have access to them during this time of COVID and learn some really fundamental practices that I've been able to incorporate. I also got more into disability studies, partially in honor of my daughter Hina, my Hina girl, but also noticing that our own activist circles here in Hawaii don't really have a good disabilities lens yet. And so I've been trying to work and trying to incorporate them. And so all of these have kind of come together. Transformative justice comes out of an anti-feminine or an anti-carceral feminism. It comes out of Black feminisms. It's looking at types of models of dealing with harm and violence. So violence is any kind of harm that's done where a person or a group is trying to have more power over someone else. And harm is anything that affects people. So you can have harm. You can have harm even, we talk about intention versus impact. So you may intend to do something good, but it still may have an impact of harm on someone, whether you intended it to or not. And so there are all different levels of harm, from microaggressions to, rape and murder, content warning kind of harms that are very destructive. And transformative justice tries to look at forms of conflict resolution that are not carceral, that are not based in punishment, because our system in America is very much based in punishment. Even if we go in our Hawaiian ancestral traditions, at least under the Aikapu, is based on punishment. So trying to look at models that don't seek to punish, but to seek more forms of community accountability. So how do we name harm? How do we circle around and have a trauma-informed person harmed at the center of our work? I call it pico-centered. You know, the person in the center is at the pico. It's at the umbilical connection where we start life, where we try and nurture life. So we put those who are harmed in the center of that, and we work out in concentric circles with those who were harmed, those who committed the harm, and need to have a circle around them to hold them so that they can take accountability, so that they can be vulnerable, that they have a brave enough space, that they can be brave to take accountability. Our culture is not built for that yet. You know, we live amongst a rape culture.
Yeah.
That is the system that we're in, that dismisses, that keeps everything silent. It's a culture of silence. We don't want to be the one to bring down the Mauna with our experience. We don't want to be the one that causes an organization on campus to collapse because of bad reputations, you know. So we have to learn to get out of that and to unsettle ourselves and to create these centers of care that can hold all of the stories that are real, they're really happening, that we don't want to talk about, in a way that's care oriented, so that we can provide care for those who are harmed, those who do the harm. And we have to remember that when someone is harmed, you're not only harming them, you're harming all the people who care about them. So we also need to have care around the caregivers,
Right.
the care workers, those who have witnessed harm are also harmed themselves. So kind of learning how to transform the culture itself from the basis, and not expecting always the experts or the ones who have institutional power to take on that labor, but to actually learn how to do it for ourselves, to be in relations where we can learn those skills and then learn to reach out when we need to, but not automatically going to the police, not automatically going to the authorities to do that kind of work. Sometimes it's called for, absolutely. And when those cases come up, then, you know, then we pivot and we call in people who are used to dealing in those realms. But until then, doing our best to hold each other with care culture and with accountability. That kind of work is really important. And from what I've seen in the work that I've done, it really transforms the way you show up to a space.
Mhm.
And so that's the beautiful part of it, is that you start to grow in your own self and in collaboration and community, and everyone starts to transform. It's a very, very slow process, but every bit really does help.
I agree. Yeah. I think that this is something that we could teach everybody, every person, and is something that we
If
could
folks
bring
are
in.
interested, we'll be teaching more workshops this summer and next year. You can contact Alu Academic Labor United. They're some of the ones that host these, but you can also reach out to Aha Kia'i Aloha. That's mine and Kahala's group that provide the training. So you can reach out to any of those above or just email me directly, and I can add you to our mailing list. And when we have trainings, you're welcome to come join us.
Check them out, y'all. Check them out. So I do have two last questions. I might group them together in order to respect your time. The first one is, what would you say to people that are having a hard time trying to like figure out which category or field they want to belong to? Like maybe they're an educator or a therapist or a community organizer. They're not sure how to flex to all these different roles. As speaking as someone who wears all these hats, different hats very well. And then how do you make time and space for your own joy, and what does that look like for you? Is the other question.
Oh, beautiful questions.
Mhm.
One of our recent talks was by a Palestinian novelist, poet, scholar, teacher, professor, community activist named Hala Alyan. And not only has she come to speak in person, she also did another webinar for us event with SFJP. I was recently listening to her on podcast or Adrienne Marie Brown's podcast with her on it. And so her work, she's one of those people that, along with Adrienne Marie Brown, that wear all these hats really well. And I think part of it is, I'll use my moon metaphor, it comes in cycles. So we can't necessarily do everything at the exact same time. They've kind of talked about how multitasking may not be the best way of sharing our mana. Like there need to be times of stepping up and really like leaning into one form or wearing one hat and then, shifting and pivoting to wearing another one. Sometimes you do wear more than one at once. I have been known to produce and be in a particular production. So sometimes you do wear them multiple ones. A lot of it is having a really strong network of folks that you can rely on so that you don't have to wear all the hats. One of the things I tell people is, we weren't really built to be activists. We weren't built to have to do this work. We shouldn't have to do this work. I don't want to have to do this work. I want to live in a liberated world now. But I also recognize that's not the case. The university is not, I don't have any illusions that I can like completely transform it completely and overhaul it. I'm one person, but I can create pockets where I do create these little kipuka or pu'uhonua within myself to invite other folks into my orbit, my space, and we create things together, we collaborate together. So wearing the hats means collaborating really well. A lot of give and take, a lot of reciprocity, a lot of grace, a lot of graciousness in building those pilina. And that is part of my joy. So pilina really is the joy, making friends, seeing each other rise up to the occasion. We take turns being the leader, being the front line, being the back line, being the invisible line that nobody ever sees. All of those roles are important, and acknowledging that we can be in different roles for different people in different movements. So where I may be a spokesperson in one, I might be the medic in another. You may never see me in another one because I'm either behind the camera or behind the scenes making the food. Or maybe I can't actually participate in one because I've got other things going on. And so I lend my money, or I write a letter of support, or I sign a petition. We all have different ways of showing up in our capacity. So learning what our capacity is really important. For those of us who do care work, we tend to get burnt out, and it's really important that we shore ourselves up so that we can come back to do the work again. And so joy is really part of that. My joy comes in really small moments, actually. It's the small moments of, I wake up every morning and I drive by the ko'olau and I'm like, hi, mountain. Thank you for having such a strong backbone and reminding me of my own spine and backbone and posture and how I show up to places. Thank you for showing up for me this morning, all covered in mist and beautiful. It allows me to remember to show up as a mountain with my strength and my grace and the mist around me. Because maybe I want to hide today, and that's okay too. Giving myself permission to be whatever phase of my moon that I want to show up in is that joy. The other joy is I love seeing that aha moment in people's eyes, whether it's my students or my friends or my coworkers or my colleagues or activists, where we have that like eureka moment, right? That like, oh my gosh, now I get it. That moment is like so juicy for me. I love that. My joy comes in music and creating music. I call myself a songcatcher and a storykeeper because stories are so important. My joy is sharing stories about my own life and hearing stories about other people's lives that are real. Like I can read about things, but really talking it through with someone and feeling what they feel and seeing their body language and their eyes light up, and knowing that embodied knowledge, those stories that are living in our cells, are being released through story. That's a form of healing. That's medicine. Our bodies are medicine. Our voices are medicine to each other. That's my joy. making music together. Those are my joys. And then I think one of my, because I'm a water baby, one of my greatest joys is going to the river, into that icy cold water, and like just feeling the river, the mo'o water just clean me and make me refreshed and renewed, or going to the ocean, to Kanaloa, to Namaka realms of the salt water, to also wash away and purify and clean and hold me. You get held by the ocean in a way that no one else can hold you, right? It buoys you, it holds you up. And so, yeah, those are my joys.
Wow. Thank you so much, Māhea, for taking this time to talk story with me. I really wanted to make sure that like your work was immortalized. Because I feel like a lot of people can resonate with your story and might be interested in doing the same work and learning some of the same things. So it was really powerful to hear like your personal story, and thank you for being vulnerable with us here.
My joy.
Thank you.